I was watching the Misadventures of Romesh Ranganathan a few weeks ago. I'd heard of this show before, it's been around for quite a while, I think maybe 4 seasons, but this was my very first time actually watching an episode. I love travel, I love adventure, this is one of my passions. I love the idea of exploring the world and seeing all of its wonders, experiencing all of the variety of amazing things that God has given us in his creation. So for that reason, I do like a travel show as well, so I thought I'd give this one a go. In this episode, he happened to be exploring Uganda. For people who don't know Romesh, he's a British comedian and presenter of Sri Lankan descent. And in this episode, he was set up with a local guide called Alex, who showed him what her country had to offer. So the plan was to do some white water rafting, see some of the amazing scenery there, take a look at the amazing wildlife as well. It all sounded pretty good. But at the very beginning of the show, Romesh was asked about his preconceptions of Uganda and what he expected to encounter on this trip, and he said this.
But then the other thing is, between us deciding to come here and us actually arriving, Uganda has just passed a load of essentially anti-gay laws and legislation. So, you know, that's something that I'm hoping to kind of chew on during my time here.
So he makes it known at the beginning that as part of this journey, he wants to have a conversation about Ugandan attitudes towards homosexuality at some point. So after doing some whitewater rafting, exploring the Nile and seeing some amazing scenery and wildlife, he decides to start broaching the subject with his guide Alex.
Alex explained that the country is still highly religious. 81% of the Christian population attend church every week, and society is built on a bedrock of highly traditional conservative faith.
Where do you sit in the scale of your generation of people? And are you quite more traditional than the average person of your age, or less, or about the same, would you say?
I think I'm a bit more traditional.
Right.
But again, people from the royal family were expected to behave in such a way to protect its norms, protect its values.
Yeah.
A lot. I'm old school.
Yeah. So do you look at like society in the UK and feel like it's lost its way a little bit then? Is that kind of...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
In terms of what? Because I think, you know, a lot of people in the UK would agree with you, but I mean, what's your kind of take on it?
So, okay, from what we see on social media, and we see that there's a lot more acceptance for people acting on how they feel.
Right.
Which, for us, your feelings are valid, but they're not the most important thing.
Okay.
Yeah, so society has rules, so to say, and we abide by them.
Okay. So what you mean by that is...
Men are men.
Men are men and women are women.
Women are women. You don't overcomplicate it. It's basics.
I admire Alex for being forthright about the UK losing its way. She's being friendly, but when asked a direct question, she's not afraid to call it how she sees it. She's very straightforward in giving her response, and I like that. And I know a lot of people in the UK actually agree with their assessment. The UK has lost its way morally. As the episode goes on, Romesh decides he's going to stop tiptoeing around the issue, and he wants to have a proper, full discussion about Ugandan attitudes towards homosexuality.
As amazing as Uganda had been so far, I was aware that there was an elephant in the room. Uganda's new so-called anti-gay laws.
Between us deciding to come to Uganda and make this show,
Okay.
and us arriving in Uganda to make this show, a new set of laws and legislation were put in place. So I guess my first question would be, what's your... I mean, how popular is that?
I think it represents what we believe as a people.
Okay.
That women marry men. That's it. There's no in-between.
It comes from a religious thing, right?
And culture, really.
And a cultural thing,
yes,
okay.
that's just how... And actually, people were happy when the president signed the bill. I was for it.
Yeah. For full clarity,
Yeah.
I'm coming from a country that has completely different attitude to that. And also my own personal views are different. I'm giving you an idea of what my bias is in this, but I'm trying to be like, you know...
What is your bias, if I may ask?
My belief is that it's no more a choice to be homosexual than it is to be a choice to be heterosexual.
Okay.
So you're saying, in my opinion, I want to make it illegal for you to be who you are. It's the same thing as saying to me, we're going to make it illegal to be brown. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
That's kind of how I see it. How do you feel about the idea that they have no choice about who they are? You know.
I think you do.
You think so?
Yes, please.
So you think, in your opinion, every gay person has chosen to be gay?
I mean, how else are they gay?
The idea that homosexuality is a choice or can be a choice is objectively true. For example, the lesbian activist Julie Bindel has repeatedly stated over the years that there is no gay gene and she chose to be a lesbian. She said if she wanted to be straight, she would be. For her, the decision to be gay was an outworking of a feminist-inspired rebellion.
I loved the feeling that I'd chosen my sexuality.
Cynthia Nixon, the actress, has said repeatedly that she also chose to be gay. She said she'd had straight relationships and gay relationships and concluded, for me, it is a choice. In an article for the BBC, Brandon Ambrosino writes that he's gay, but he wasn't born that way. He chose to be gay. He chose to enter that lifestyle. Romesh is incredulous about this idea, but he really shouldn't be, because over here you have actual gay people putting up their hand and admitting it was something they chose. They weren't born that way. It was something they chose. You also don't have to look very far to find people who chose to leave that lifestyle and are now living happy, healthy, heterosexual married lives.
Well, I didn't choose to be heterosexual. I am heterosexual by nature.
Yeah.
I don't believe it's any different for homosexual people.
Romesh keeps insisting on this idea, which is very popular in the West as a whole, that he thinks people are born gay. As of this moment, there is no scientific basis for that assumption. I mean, he's free to keep believing it. That's his prerogative, but it's just not backed up by science as we currently understand it. There is no known genetic cause for same-sex behaviour. And this is after at least 30 years of concerted efforts, it's got to be said. In fact, Patrick Gerzanka, a professor of psychology at Tennessee, describes the pursuit of a gay gene amongst American scientists in particular as ravenous in recent decades, because of course it would be politically expedient if a gay gene was found, and yet none ever has been. Simon LeVay in 1991 and then Dean Hamer in 1993 made waves by suggesting there may be such things as gay brains and gay genes, but these ideas were quickly falsified by the scientific community, and both of these people now accept that conclusion. Simon Copland admits, when it comes to our sexuality, it is very unlikely we are born this way. Brandon Ambrosino is even more clear-cut. He says, what are we to do with this born this way rhetoric? It's just not the truth as we currently understand it. So Romesh Ranganathan, along with wider Western culture, it's got to be said, assume something that has no scientific foundation. You can still believe it, but according to science, it's just not true. Now from there, Alex then starts talking about the need to protect children from LGBTQ plus propaganda.
Sex is not something that you tell children. Like, it's not something that it's open, and we don't do that. We had incidents where books were taken to schools,
Right.
In the library, and that caused an outrage. And so the Ministry of Education said, we won't be having this in the schools. So that's what happened. The first thing was to protect children.
Okay.
Yeah.
Protect children from what, though?
From that kind of content.
I tried to find the incident that Alex was talking about here because I had no prior knowledge of this story, but it appears to be an event that happened in 2016 where about 100 Ugandan schools were duped into accepting materials from the World Population Foundation. Now, the World Population Foundation is an NGO established by none other than Bill Gates and his wife. And the materials he was trying to slide into Ugandan classrooms promoted homosexuality. These materials also promoted the baseless born this way argument, which I think shows the malevolent and very clear ideological bent of the Bill Gates Foundation, trying to undermine Ugandan culture and Christian beliefs by sneaking this stuff into classrooms under the radar. When the Ugandan government found out about this, they banned those books from the classrooms and libraries, and they implemented laws to protect the innocence of children. Now, Romesh appears a little bit bemused when Alex says this, that it's about protecting children. He kind of says, protect them from what? It's a kind of defensive reaction. What are you protecting them from? What are you trying to say? But I think this is where the conversation really stops being a matter of mere opinion and starts to become a very clear distinction between good and evil. The desire of the LGBTQ plus community, supported by the left establishment, the political establishment of the left, to have access to young children so they can sexualize them with their propaganda, is a recurring and obvious theme of their movement, whether it be trying to slip propaganda into schools through books like this, whether it be gay teachers caught trying to teach it to toddlers, whether it be through drag queen story times, sexualized performances in front of kids, using kids in gay pride parades, chanting about actively targeting children. This is a clear and intentional strategy from the LGBTQ plus community. And it's a very clear and intentional evil, I would say. Until very recently, everyone in the West agreed upon this, that children should have their innocence protected. They should be shielded from all forms of sexualization and sexual propaganda, but especially that of the LGBTQ variety. The fact that Romesh has any issue with this at all, I mean, protecting children from sexualization, the fact he has any issue with this is representative of the sickness in British and Western culture. The conversation continues.
Let's assume that homosexuality is a choice. What's wrong with letting people make that choice?
What's wrong with letting homosexual people make that choice? Love is love, right? That's the mantra that so many people live by today in the West. All expressions of love are equal. It's all the same. But that's just not true. Homosexuality uniquely causes huge harms, both to the individuals themselves and to society as a whole. Even though gay men make up just 1.7% of the American population, they make up 86% of HIV infections and 83% of syphilis cases. Similar results exist for hepatitis B, chlamydia, gonorrhea, genital warts, and HPV. The gay lifestyle is significantly more disease-prone. Gay men, for example, are 17 times more likely to get anal cancer than straight men. In general, gay men are twice as likely to get any kind of cancer compared to straight men. In fact, so bad is the homosexual lifestyle for health that back in the 1990s, before we developed the drugs to manage these problems, gay men could expect to have their lifespan decreased on average by 20 to 30 years. Homosexual relationships are more promiscuous, they're less stable, and they're more violent. And all of this costs the taxpayer. It costs society hundreds of millions of pounds per year. So it's just not true to say that all expressions of love are equal. Love is love. There's natural, normal, righteous expressions, and there's unnatural, abnormal expressions. And we know this is true because we wouldn't condone a human being going with a sheep or a cow or a donkey, or a brother and a sister. There's normal, natural, there's abnormal, unnatural. On that note, we have significant evidence that sexual confusion, i.e. homosexuality, is a result of emotional trauma in developmental years. This is what we were talking about in the last video. According to a study by Vanderbilt involving 60,000 participants, they discovered that 83% of gay people report adverse childhood experiences like emotional or sexual abuse. Another study found 46% of homosexual men compared to 7% of heterosexual men had experienced molestation. 22% of lesbians compared to 1% of straight women had experienced molestation. A 2014 report says there is a positive association between physical and sexual abuse, neglect, and witnessing violence in childhood and same-sex sexuality in adulthood. So by affirming homosexuality, you're often affirming sexual brokenness caused by trauma. Brokenness isn't something to be affirmed, it's something to be healed. That is what's wrong with promoting and affirming homosexuality.
Do we allow people to make all choices? They just make the choice as they feel.
Well, I mean, within limit.
Exactly. This is a limit. We have guardrails in everything. I think it's okay. No offense, but I feel like in the West, your guardrails are very wide.
Yeah.
In the UK, they're told it's normal.
Yeah.
Right? In Uganda, they will be told it's not normal.
Okay.
That's the difference.
So there must be lots of people in homosexual relationships.
Lots?
Yeah, I would say lots.
I have never in my life met a homosexual couple. I've never met it.
Never, ever?
Never.
Okay.
In 2014, the percentage of the UK population identifying as LGBT was just 1.6%. Now, due to incessant propaganda, social contagion, and intersectional ideology being pushed on children for the best part of 10 to 15 years, if not more, that has admittedly now risen to 3.1%, but it's still a tiny minority of the population, thus proving just how unnatural it really is. When you've been actively pushing it with propaganda for decades, and it's still just a tiny fraction, you should understand its true nature. I think perhaps the reason it may appear to be lots to Romesh is because he lives in the London metropolitan elite bubble where this behaviour is concentrated, but the vast majority of people remain straight. Again, because it's natural and it's normal.
I think that if you became really close friends with somebody and then you later on discovered that they were homosexual and then this law was passed, I think you'd have a different attitude to it.
I don't think so.
If you like...
I would, as a person, I would love them.
Yeah.
I still don't agree with what they're doing, but I love them.
Now, this is very interesting. This, I think, is the real crux of homosexual acceptance in the West. I think Romesh has just betrayed a very important and deep truth that we should listen to about what's actually happened here in recent decades since the 1967 Cultural Revolution. The vast majority of people in the West have not accepted homosexuality because of science or data or the discovery of a gay gene, because none of that's actually happened. It's not through intellectual inquiry or reason that people have become convinced to accept homosexuality. Rather, it's reached a place of acceptance simply because people know someone who's gay, a friend or family member perhaps. They feel sad for them, they feel sorry, they feel heartsore for them. They want to support that person, and then they get swept up in this emotional cultural tide. Think about this. If you're pro-homosexuality, what scientific study, what paper was it that you read that convinced you of this fact? I'm pretty confident in saying there wasn't one, was there? You started promoting homosexuality only because you know someone personally who's gay and you felt sad for them, you wanted to support them, or you've simply unthinkingly fallen in line with the cultural tide. In other words, you think the way that you do because everyone else around you thinks the same way. You've merely assimilated your thoughts to the herd around you without actually exploring this issue in any depth. But again, Alex has the right response to this. She says that if she found out her friend had homosexual feelings, she would keep loving her, but that doesn't mean that she would condone their sin. And that's a logically coherent response. That's how it should be. If your friend starts committing theft, you would keep loving your friend, but that doesn't mean you start condoning theft. That doesn't mean that you suddenly become pro-theft. If something's morally wrong, it doesn't matter if your friend's into it, it's still wrong. You should still oppose it. Romesh's argument here is simply incoherent, and yet it is the argument of wider and Western society. There's so many people that think this way. But it's like saying, you think murder is wrong right now, Alex, but I bet if you had a friend who was a murderer, then you'd approve of murder. I bet you'd be pro-murder then, Alex. It's simply not coherent. Alex had it right in the car when she said that life isn't just about what you feel. Your feelings are valid, but there are guardrails. There's right and wrong. You should love good and you should hate evil, as the Bible says. Now, as Romesh is wrapping the show up, he does another monologue to camera reflecting on his time in Uganda. And the question he was asked was, would you recommend Uganda as a travel destination?
When I first came here, I knew nothing about this country really, just Idi Amin. But Uganda has got
a handful of once-in-a-lifetime experiences. You know, it's got all of the stuff that I was sort of expecting in terms of natural beauty, wildlife, but it's got that and then some. For those things alone, it's been an amazing experience. And on top of that, people are fantastic. Everybody, pretty universally, is friendly and welcoming, and they give you the feeling that they're delighted to see you in the country.
Oh, it's an otter bit.
See what I mean? You're just doing a little piece, the camera, an otter pops up. That's what it's like here. It's like being in Narnia. There's amazing wildlife. It's just set up beautifully for you to come and have a visit. And on the other hand, you've got a country that has just passed what I would describe as a disgusting law that has widespread support. Violence against people from the gay community is essentially being sanctioned and being supported. It's horrific. The question is, would I visit this country knowing all of that? And the truth is despite all of the wonderful things that Uganda has to offer, I don't think I could. I don't think I can wholeheartedly recommend this as a place to come.
So he's basically admitting that Uganda is incredible. It's like Narnia. The people are the absolute best. They're super kind and friendly, amazing scenery and wildlife. You're going to have a handful of once-in-a-lifetime experiences if you go there, but because they don't approve of sodomy, you never should. Do you realise how imbalanced, how insane you've become on this issue? I'm sure that in his head while he's saying that, he's kind of patting himself on the back and thinking of all the points he's going to score with the metropolitan elite in London back home. He's thinking, I'm saying the right things here, am I? I'm saying the right things. Everyone back in the UK is going to be so proud of me saying these things, taking this public stance. But are you insane? It's the best. It's like Narnia. You're going to have a handful of once-in-a-lifetime experiences, but because they happen to believe things about homosexuality that, by the way, we also universally believed in Britain for thousands of years and up until about 10 minutes ago, you should never go there. It's crazy how the left have made sexuality this central, overriding, outsized issue that overrides every other consideration in life. If anyone's watching this in Uganda right now, hold fast to your Christian conservative values. Thanks for trying to show our society the way through shows like this on the BBC. I hope you prosper and flourish, and I hope that Britain and the West as a whole can one day come back to our senses on this issue.